will come to order. Two days ago, last Sunday, was a day of family celebration for me. My 3-year-old granddaughter celebrated her birthday the same week as her sister, 10 years old. We had a lot of fun. The family got together, cakes, gifts, a lot of jokes and laughing, a lot of selfies, a lot of good memories. I reflected on that last night. My 10-year-old would have been a fourth grader, is a fourth grader in Chicago. She would have been just the appropriate age to be in Uvalde, Texas at that elementary school yesterday. Yesterday, 19 little girls and boys, just like my granddaughter, did not come home from school. And 2 teachers lost their lives. Some shooter managed to buy at age 18 2 semi-automatic weapons and to turn them into killing machines, killing innocent children in the classroom. I wish I could say, well, that's never happened before in America, but we know better. There have been 24 shootings in K through 12 campuses in America this year. This year. 28 kids so far have died. And of course, we know, sadly, that that's not the end of the story by a long shot. Yesterday at the Robb Elementary School, 19 children, 2 teachers, shot and killed. 19 children who will never grow up to have another birthday. And 2 teachers killed just doing their job and protecting the kids. Another day in America, another mass shooting. It is devastating that this kind of mass shooting can happen here. It is unconscionable that it happens over and over. It is unforgivable that we as leaders have come to the point where we mouth words and do nothing. Of course, our prayers go out to the victims and their loved ones. Our thanks go to the first responders, as they always do, several of whom reportedly were fired upon themselves. Prayers and thanks, and then we return to our normal lives and wait for the next gun tragedy, which we know is coming. After every horrific shooting, there's a debate over whether one reform or another could have prevented it. That debate misses the point. It's too late to prevent the last shooting. We've already failed those victims and families. We need to act to prevent the next shooting. We need to identify the risks and threats and finally do something. This is the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm proud to chair it. This committee has the jurisdiction under the rules of the Senate to consider the measures that could make this a safer America. Making sure you can't get a gun without passing a background check is just common sense. And the overwhelming majority of Americans and gun owners support it. It won't prevent every shooting, but it will prevent many. Last night, the Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, filed a Rule 14 on a background check bill. We're going to have a chance to debate that and to vote on it on the floor when we return from Memorial Day. The House of Representatives already passed a bill on this. I think it's time for the Senate to vote on it. It takes bipartisanship to pass anything in the United States Senate, in an evenly divided Senate. But we should vote. That's why we were elected. Today, we're holding a hearing on a nominee to head the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, the lead federal law enforcement agency when it comes to responding to gun crimes. This is an agency which has the technical capacity to help us to solve gun crimes and to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. Do you know when the last time was that there was a head of this agency? Somebody actually named to head the agency? 7 years ago. Under the previous president, this spot went vacant for 4 years. Why? Because the gun groups want it to go vacant. They don't want a strong agency doing its job. And they had their way. We have a well-qualified nominee in Steve Dettelbach, who's here today. He spent 7 years as a U.S. attorney in Cleveland. His nomination is supported by a long list of law enforcement. I won't read all of them, but trust me, they encompass the major law enforcement groups across America. they support Steve Dettelbach to head the ATF. In addition, he has the backing of a bipartisan group of 141 former Justice Department officials, including several Trump appointees who won unanimous Republican support in the Senate, and the support of 8 former directors and acting directors of ATF, including Bradley Buckles, who served as director from 1999 to 2004. This overwhelming support for Mr. Dettelbach is a recognition of his capabilities and experience, but also of the need to do something to address gun crimes. It's high time for the Senate to do this, to confirm an ATF director, not to take guns away from responsible, stable, qualified, law-abiding Americans, but to help stop straw purchases, combat gun trafficking, ensure that families can send their kids to school safely, and law enforcement officers can return home each day to their loving families. This committee will treat this nomination with urgency it deserves and give Mr. Dettelbach prompt consideration and a vote. We also will hear from 4 other nominees: Judge Sarah Miriam, nominated to the Second Circuit; Laura Montecalvo, nominated to the First Circuit; Tiffany Cartwright, nominated to the Western District of Washington; and Judge Nina Wong, nominated to the District of Colorado. A number of our colleagues are going to be coming and going. They have other committee hearings. We understand their schedules are busy to formally introduce their nominees. But I will also like to turn at this point to my friend and the ranking Republican, Senator Grassley.
It's too easy to express condolences for those affected by the shooting in Texas. It's not easy for individuals thousands of miles away to understand how parents and friends, grandparents, and everybody else is hurt by 20 people being killed and 2 teachers being killed. The killing of children is sickening and heartbreaking. Schools should be a safe place for students and educators. It's a sad time when you see all this on television. Then when it's gone, you kind of forget about it. But I haven't forgotten about an idea that came to my mind way back in 2018 with the Parkland killings. I didn't have an idea immediately after that, but we talked to some parents, talked to one of those parents very recently in my office last week, because he's in support of a legislation that I put in then, and we have a hard time, a very bipartisan bill, a bill that is backed by 40 of our 50 state attorneys general. I call it the Eagles Act after the mascot of that Parkland High School thing. It would give schools and law enforcement additional resources to make sure dangerous individuals can't do what happened yesterday. I don't know to what extent it would keep our schools safer, but I know this, that the Secret Service has been exercising some help to train people how to notify people that are harm to themselves or harm to somebody else and intervene in it. And this would be extended to personnel of schools. I don't know why such a bipartisan bill doesn't get attention of people, but I'm bringing it to my colleagues' attention once again. We have 5 nominees here today, 2 circuit court nominees, 2 district court nominees, and the new appointee to be director of ATF. I want to briefly address Mr. Dettelbach's nomination to serve as director of ATF. I've expressed concerns about his nomination in a letter to President Biden back in April based on initial reviews of that record. My concerns remain. He's the second nominee for this position after Mr. Chipman, who failed to garner sufficient support. Since then, this administration removed the former acting director Richardson of ATF. The New York Times reported that gun control groups criticized him for, quote, deploying agents to deal with gun violence, end of quote. Gun control advocates were frustrated that Mr. Richardson took a law and order approach to his job, but that approach is what we should expect from the ATF. I'm concerned that this administration is responding to demands to focus on the ATF's regulatory responsibilities at the expense of law enforcement duties. We also have 2 circuit nominees and 2 district court nominees today. Judge Miriam was here last year when she was nominated to serve as a district court judge, and Ms. Monte Calvo worked at the Justice Department, the Tax Division, and then as a public defender for a majority of her career. Judge Wang has worked as an assistant U.S. attorney, as a partner in a firm, and currently is a magistrate judge. Ms. Cartwright has spent a decade in private practice after clerking for 2 judges. I welcome the nominees and their families and congratulate them on their nomination.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. We have a number of senators who've come to introduce judicial nominees. Senator Blumenthal has not arrived yet, but Senator Murphy is here to introduce Judge Miriam.
Thank you very much to the committee. Thank you for your opening remarks. Our thoughts, our prayers, our entire hearts are with the community in Texas today, and I look forward to the thoughtful way that this committee will approach our obligation to those families. I have confidence that there is a way that we can come together as a body to provide an answer to families that are very, very scared this morning. I really couldn't be more pleased to be with the committee today to recommend to you a candidate for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Judge Miriam is a candidate that can and should be able to win bipartisan support. A bipartisan majority of the Senate confirmed her just last year for the district court in Connecticut. Judge Miriam is the same person today that she was last year, and I think we will be able to bring a bipartisan majority to support her again for this important position. She received a large positive vote from the Senate for a simple reason. She is an extraordinary legal talent. As part of her application, Judge Miriam received letters of support from 22 former federal prosecutors. That is impressive in and of itself, but it's even more impressive since prosecutors were often on the receiving end of Judge Miriam's advocacy during her 8 years as an assistant federal public defender. As a lawyer, both in public and private practice, no one fought harder for her clients than did Sarah. But when Senator Blumenthal and I were canvassing the best legal minds in Connecticut during our selection process for the district court last year, it was just extraordinary how many prosecutors, those that had gone up against Sarah in court, were her biggest champions. That's because Judge Miriam was dogged, but she was fair. And her greatest loyalty from day one of her legal career has always been to the law, to fairness, to finding a just outcome. That's who she's been on the bench, both as a federal magistrate and now as a district court judge. She has demonstrated a blend of humility, compassion, and toughness that makes her stand out. She is also, just simply for the committee's knowledge, a wonderful human being. She has been a friend of mine for nearly 30 years. She is a proud daughter of New Haven, Connecticut. She loves the state with all of her heart. After graduating as a standout at Georgetown University, she could have gone anywhere in the world to begin her career, but those that knew Sarah knew that she was coming back to Connecticut to make a difference. She cares about the people of our state, and she has shown that throughout her career in all the variety of ways that she has served. She is also just a super interesting person. I'm not sure if the pandemic or the new job has interrupted her passion projects, but for much of her life on summer weekends, you could find Judge Miriam at one of Connecticut's many agricultural fairs competing in high-stakes baking competitions. And if the committee wants to ask her about that, be my guest. I'm so pleased to be able to be here to introduce her once again to this committee, and I hope you move her nomination expeditiously through the process and to the floor. You won't regret it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Murphy, and as well to our colleagues who are here to introduce other nominees. If you have to be off to another meeting, we understand. Senator Blumenthal has a conflict with the Commerce Committee, and he's asked to be recognized next. So,
Thank you. In deference to my colleagues who are here, I'm going to be brief. Let me just say about Sarah Merriam, whom I'm proud to introduce to this committee. She's the real deal. She's a litigator's litigator. She has shown her dedication to the law, not just to winning in court, but to fairness and justice. As a public defender for 8 years, as a litigator in private practice, and then as a judge magistrate, she has shown her dedication to the rule of law. That's what her career has been about from the start. And I think that her clerkship for Judge Alvin Thompson on the district court and then Judge Meskel shows her distinguished intellectual background as well as her devotion to the rule of law. I spent a good deal of my career in federal court. I consider myself a trial lawyer. She's the kind of trial lawyer and judge that I would like to have participating in any matter where I was involved. She fulfills all of the qualifications and expectations that this committee has a right to demand. And I think that I want to say a word about President Biden. He has been dedicated absolutely to diversity on the bench. She brings that diversity in her experience as a public defender. As Senator Murphy remarked, the 22 federal prosecutors who attest to her ability were on the opposite side from her. And her integrity, as well as her ability, are really very strongly evidenced by their endorsement. So I'm very proud to endorse her. I think she will be a tremendous addition to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals if she is confirmed, as I hope she will be expeditiously, because we have to fill these seats on the bench. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you very much, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Whitehouse, I understand, is going to wait to the end. Yes. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we'll let the other senators go on to their business. I'm here.
Yes, thank you much. Senator Cantwell had a conflict, but has submitted a statement in the record for Ms. Cartwright, but Senator Murray is here. I recognize her now.
Thank you very much, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley. Today, it is my honor to introduce Tiffany Cartwright, President Biden's nominee for the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington State, who I was proud to recommend for this position. As the committee knows, Washington State has had 6 vacancies on the bench for a number of years, so I must thank President Biden and this committee for working so quickly to provide some long and awaited reinforcements to our bench in Seattle and Tacoma. In addition, I want to thank my nonpartisan Judicial Merit Selection Committee. It's comprised of 10 Washington State lawyers who've ably guided us in selecting the highly qualified nominees that have appeared before you in the past year, including Tiffany Cartwright. Tiffany Cartwright has strong academic credentials, earning degrees from Stanford University and Stanford Law School, as well as incredible trial experience. After graduation, she clerked on the Alaska Supreme Court for Justice Dana Fabe, and then on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit for Judge Betty Benz Fletcher. As a trial lawyer in Seattle, she dedicated her career to civil rights and ensuring that the law was faithfully executed on behalf of those it was meant to defend, whether it was employees who faced discrimination in the workplace, farm workers who were being denied the overtime protections they'd earned, voters who were looking to ensure their votes counted, or the families of victims of police misconduct. Tiffany has had their backs, and I have no doubt that she will continue to ensure that everyone has access to justice on the federal bench, not just the wealthy and well-connected. She has the support of law enforcement officers, including a Washington State Corrections Officer and an ATF Special Agent, both of whom spoke to her dedication to their cases and her commitment to justice. Beyond her litigation experience, she understands her district and Washington State. For 6 years, Tiffany has served on the local Rules Committee of the Federal Bar Association of the Western District of Washington, giving her unique expertise in the region's thorniest legal issues. Washington State deserves judges on the federal bench that know their communities and understand how their decisions impact working families. They deserve judges who will stand up for civil rights, who will stand up for the rule of law, and who will be faithful to the Constitution and the rights it grants us. They deserve judges like Tiffany Cartwright. It is my honor to be here today to introduce her before this committee, and I hope the members of this committee will help me get her confirmed as quickly as possible so she can continue doing her incredible work for the state of Washington. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Murray. The last judicial nominee before Senator Whitehouse is recognized is Judge Wong. Senator Hickenlooper of Colorado has a conflict and can't be here, but he'll submit a statement for the record. Senator Bennett is here. I recognize him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to start also by acknowledging what happened in Texas yesterday. My oldest daughter, Caroline, was born the year after Columbine happened in my state, and she's now 22 years old. Colorado's passed background checks and other common sense laws, and I hope we're going to be able to do that here in the Congress. Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, for letting me share a few words about Nina Wong, President Biden's nominee for the U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado. Judge Wong comes to this committee with a commitment to the law rooted in her earliest memories as a child. Nina's family immigrated from Taiwan to Kansas City when she was just 2 years old. Like my grandparents who immigrated from Poland, Nina's parents had very strong accents. They knew English, but people in their Kansas suburb couldn't always understand them. Some of Nina's first memories were ordering pizza for the family or speaking to store clerks on behalf of her parents. Her family applied to become permanent residents, but the INS lost their application. And once they resolved the issue, the law had changed and their pathway to legalization was gone. The family spent years in legal limbo, ricocheting from one court to another. So Nina made a promise. If I can stay in America, I'm going to give back to America. And if not for an intervention by the late Senator Bob Dole, Nina's family would have fallen through the cracks. This experience gave Nina firsthand knowledge of the legal system's power to change lives because it changed her own. It made her cherish America's legal system, where even non-citizens have their day in court. And it inspired her to pursue a career in law. She graduated from Washington University, summa cum laude, and Phi Beta Kappa. She earned a JD from Harvard Law School and served as editor-in-chief of the Civil Rights, Civil Liberties Law Review. And after graduating, Nina worked as an associate at an international law firm and clerked for the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Colorado recognized Nina's talents and hired her as an AUSA in the Civil Division, where she managed federal cases ranging from employment discrimination to bankruptcy to civil rights. Nina then went into the private sector, where over the next decade she rose from associate to partner at Faegre Drinker, a top firm in Denver. And in 2015, Nina began serving as a magistrate judge for the U.S. District Court in Colorado. Judge Wong now comes to the committee with 25 years of legal experience and exposure to virtually every issue that might come before the court. She also comes with a reputation, Mr. Chairman, for fairness and impartiality. Her colleagues tell me she doesn't grandstand. She takes the time to listen to every litigant, whether they have representation or not. She's remained committed to the American ideal that everyone deserves their day in court, just like her parents. And I, for one, am deeply grateful that she's devoted her talent to making it real in our legal system. I also want to thank her daughter Kelsey for making the trip to Washington from Denver. Kelsey, if your teachers at Teller Elementary need a note, I'm sure Chair Durbin would be happy to write you one. Nina's husband Doug and their son Luke couldn't be here because he's finishing the 8th grade, but I know how proud they are and how proud her parents are of everything Nina's accomplished. Judge Wong is an exceptional nominee with unimpeachable character, intellect, and experience. I enthusiastically endorse her nomination, and I urge my colleagues to send her to the floor with a strong bipartisan vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Bennett. Senator Brown to introduce Mr. Dettelbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Grassley, Ranking Member, thank you both. Senator Durbin, thank you for your opening remarks about the tragedy in Texas, 21 more families. I spoke to my daughter last night about what she's going to tell her children, who are the age of those children that were murdered in Texas. And millions of families across the country have to try to explain to their children that their classrooms aren't as safe as they should be. And it just makes me hopeful, echoing what Senator Murphy said, that this Congress finally will do something. We've seen in state legislatures across the country, including in my own, those legislatures going the wrong way on this. I'm hopeful that finally, one step we can do, as the chairman said, is finally get a permanent ATF director on the job. There's no better person for that role than my longtime friend Steve Dettelbach, a son of Ohio, a career public servant, President Biden's nominee to fill this most important law enforcement position. Steve Dettelbach has the experience and the record to do this job, combating violent crime and keeping America safe. Let me talk for a moment about his record. When he was chosen as U.S. Attorney and by President Obama in 2009. For the Northern District, he worked with law enforcement, including ATF, to prosecute tough cases. I've watched him tackle some of DOJ's most sensitive cases at the intersection of law enforcement and civil rights. He prosecuted a white supremacist who tried to burn down First Azusa Apostolic Faith Church, a predominantly black church in my wife's home county in Ashtabula County in the city of Conneaut. Steve not only prosecuted the man responsible, he helped create a clergy group united against hate. When he prosecuted the firebombing of the largest mosque in Northwest Ohio, Steve, a practicing Jew, attended worship services there as a show of solidarity. He's lived the value of religious freedom. He's consistently stood up against hate and extremism, no matter to whom it was directed. He understands that politics must play no role in running ATF, and his experience and his record bear that out. It's why he has broad support from across the ideological spectrum, as the chairman pointed out, prosecutors, law enforcement officials who understand what it takes to do this job. This includes law enforcement officials like the National Sheriff's Association, the major county sheriff's association, including a number of very prominent Republican county sheriffs in Ohio. The endorsement of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, of the Hispanic American Police Command Officers Association, of the Women in Federal Law Enforcement, the International Association of Chiefs of Police. It includes 140 former federal prosecutors, 8 former ATF directors, the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, the association representing the men and women of the ATF who desperately want and ask for a full-time director. He has the support of civil rights organizations, the Urban League, the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, faith organizations like the Jewish Federation of North America. I can think of no better way to support law enforcement, to reject hate and extremism, to keep America safe from violent crime, than for the committee and the entire Senate to confirm Steve Dettelbach as ATF director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Brown, for that powerful statement. I know you have other business to attend to, and I thank you for joining us and waiting. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. It is my great honor to introduce Lara Montecalvo and to welcome Lara's husband, Craig, with whom I served as colleagues in the Rhode Island Department of Attorney General, and her son, Matthew, and her mother, Ellen, smiling proudly, and her brother, Damien, and his wife, Stephanie, and her sister Marie, and her family, Charlie and Anna. Thank you all for being here. It is wonderful to see such a terrific Rhode Island delegation here supporting Lara. A Rhode Islander and United States Department of Justice alum, Ms. Montecalvo joined the Rhode Island Public Defender's Office in 2004. She was first a trial attorney, then an appellate attorney, then promoted to chief of the office's appellate division, and the Rhode Island Senate has confirmed her as our current public defender. In that post, she upholds the public trust to ensure that every Rhode Islander involved in criminal, juvenile, and parental rights cases can access high-quality legal representation. I have been a U.S. attorney and Rhode Island's Attorney General, and I know how skilled and committed public defenders do more than just represent clients. They sharpen the wits and the arguments of judges and prosecutors. They make the law enforcement and judicial system perform better, and they protect those too easily cast aside by society. That is why I recommended Ms. Montecalvo to President Biden for this post. Her record as an advocate, her dedication to her clients, and her good stewardship of the Public Defender's Office prove that she will be an exemplary First Circuit judge. And it's not just me who believes this. Rhode Island's legal community, and we all rather know each other, have come out in force to express their confidence in her. A dozen current and retired law enforcement officers write, Laura Montecalvo enjoys a well-deserved and hard-earned reputation as an ethical and dedicated public servant, deeply committed to the fair and effective administration of the American criminal justice system, to which we have dedicated our careers. That letter is signed by the Chief Hugh Clements of the Providence Police Department, Chief Tommy Oates of the Woonsocket Police Department, Chief Brian Sullivan of the Lincoln Police Department, Colonel Michael Winquist, the Chief of the Cranston Police Department, Sean Corrigan, who is both Chief of the Narragansett Police Department and President of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, Sid Wardell, who is the Executive Director of that association, as well as the retired Chief of the town of Little Compton, and Steve O'Donnell, who has been Superintendent of the Rhode Island State Police. He's been United States Marshal, Commissioner of the Rhode Island Department of Public Safety, and extremely well-regarded leader, as well as a number of others. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer that letter into the record at this time. Thank you very much. In addition, on the prosecutorial side, 19 current and former Rhode Island prosecutors, including every other living Rhode Island Attorney General since 1987, echo those sentiments. We were witness, they say, to Ms. Montecalvo's devotion not only to the best interest of her clients, but to her steadfast fidelity to the rule of law and the interests of justice. She is an exemplary, highly qualified attorney who will serve with distinction and honor. And the signatories of that letter include Aaron Weissman, our previous nominee recommended, who served as United States Attorney for the District of Rhode Island in the last administration, Peter Nerona, our current Attorney General, and who was our previous recommendation for U.S. Attorney and served in the administration before that, Attorney General Jim O'Neill, who Craig and I worked for, if my timing is right, Jeffrey Pine, my predecessor as Attorney General, Patrick Lynch, my successor as Attorney General, and Peter Kilmartin, who followed Patrick Lynch. These distinguished folks lead a bipartisan array of prosecutorial talent in signing that letter, and I'd ask that that letter also be put into the record in support of Ms. Montecalvo.
Without objection.
It's not just the practicing bar that is so enthusiastic about Ms. Montecalvo. Here is the entire Rhode Island Supreme Court. I quote, "In our opinion, Ms. Montecalvo possesses all the experience, education, temperament, sense of duty, and integrity that is necessary to become an outstanding member of the First Circuit." And that letter is joined by another letter from a group of 28 current and retired Superior Court judges who've signed a similar letter echoing this judicial praise. The Supreme Court letter is not only signed by Chief Justice Sattel and Justices Goldberg, Robinson, Prada, and Long, but also retired Justice Frank Flaherty and retired Justice Gilbert Indeglia. And the Superior Court letter is led by Presiding Justice Alice Gibney, joined by 19 of her associate justices, as well as magistrates and retired Superior Court judges, a considerable number of whom are former prosecutors as well. And I'd ask that those two letters be put into the record.
Objection.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Reed could not be here today, but he joins me in strong and enthusiastic support for Ms. Montecalvo, and he will want to put his own statement of support into the record. He sends his congratulations and his best wishes to Laura and to her family. And I'll just conclude by saying that Ms. Montecalvo's record and commitment to the law shine very brightly. She's extremely well-known and well-respected in Rhode Island. She will be fair and impartial. She is expert in her field, and she will serve the First Circuit well. I urge all the committee to support her. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Whitehouse. I ask the two nominees for Circuit Court Judge Miriam and Ms. Montecalvo to come forward, take their seats, I want to give everyone here a kind of a indication of what's going to happen next. This is the first panel for the circuit judgeships. It'll be followed by a second panel, including those who are aspiring to be district court judges, and Mr. Dettelbach for the ATF. In the meantime, at 11 o'clock, 4 roll calls start on the floor. So you're going to see a lot of activity and movement around here, but it reflects the fact that we are trying in this important week to get some important things done before the Memorial Day break. So if I could ask the nominees to please raise their right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. The record will reflect that both answered in the affirmative, as we had hoped. Judge Miriam, you're first. You have 5 minutes. Introduce family and friends if you wish, and say a few words of advice to us.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. I want to begin by thanking President Biden for the great honor of this nomination, and Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley and all of the members of the committee for having this hearing. I want to thank Senators Blumenthal and Murphy for their very kind words and their support throughout this process. I am joined by my family today. First and foremost, my mom is here because my mom is always here, no matter where I go. And my stepdad, Michael, and my brother, Jonathan. At home watching us are Jonathan's fiancée, Christina, my brother, Alex, my sister, Lucy, my father, Dwight, and scores of aunts, uncles, and cousins, including ones in very early time zones. I'm also joined by some friends. My best friend, Paul, who makes everything more fun. I have 2 Jennies with me. One is one of my oldest friends, Jenny, who's here with her daughter, Betty. And one is one of my newer friends, who's here on behalf of all of the athletes and coaches in our gym that keep us all sane and strong. And watching from home, there are so many people who've been wonderful support to me, but I specifically want to note my friends Gail, Jen, and Cliff, my neighbors in the circle, and Linda and Lisette. And last but not least, my court family, which has been my family for many years now. The District of Connecticut and all of its judges and staff have taught me so much over the last 22 years, especially my magistrate judge colleagues, without whom the business of justice would grind to a halt. There are judges around the country who've become friends and mentors to me over the last 8 years. Our marshals, our court security officers, our clerk's office and maintenance staff that keep the court running, and my chamber staff, Chelsea and Jackson, Cassie and Tasha, and most of all, my permanent chambers staff, Sam and Andrew, without whom nothing is possible. And finally, not at all least, the 2 judges who raised me as a young lawyer, Judge Alvin Thompson, who is the kindest and most patient man I've ever known, and Judge Thomas Meskel, who's not with us. He's not with us today, but he's here in spirit, and he would have loved to see me considered for a position on the court he served and loved for so many years. I look forward to all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge. Ms. Montecalvo.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and the distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for considering my nomination to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. It is my sincere privilege to appear before you today. I'd like to thank President Biden for the honor of his nomination. And I want to thank my home state senators, whom I greatly admire, Senators Reid and Whitehouse, for their support throughout this process. And a special thank you to Senator Whitehouse for that wonderful introduction. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank my parents and family for a lifetime of love and encouragement. It's my pleasure to introduce you today to my mother, Ellen, my brother, Damien, and his wife, Stephanie, my sister, Marie, her husband, Charlie, and their daughter, Anna. Watching from home is my sister, Anne, her husband, Soren, and my mother-in-law, Joyce, and many, many nieces and nephews, aunts, uncles, and cousins, and a legion of neighbors and friends who have always been by my side, helping me in ways big and small. And of course, a special thank you to my husband, Craig, for his love and his incredible good humor, especially in the last few weeks. And to our 8-year-old son, Matthew, who is missing a Little League game to be here today with me. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues in the Rhode Island Public. It has been a privilege to all of you for so ways than I can ever name. It goes also to my broader Rhode Island legal community, the judges in the Supreme, the Superior, and District Courts who've inspired and educated me. And of course, my thanks also goes to the prosecutors and law enforcement officials and officers in the Rhode Island criminal justice community who've enriched my professional experience immensely. It is a profound honor to appear before you today, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Montecalvo. As I listened to Senator Whitehouse recount the letters of support, I don't know the size of the Rhode Island Bar Association, but I think virtually all of them have weighed in here in support of your nomination.
It was a pretty good turnout.
Yes. Congratulations. You had some interesting experiences, I believe, when it came to COVID-19 cases, did you not?
Yes, thank you. I did.
What about that?
So, I did of the first who had 9, and what we found with the court, and at the court's instruction, we sat down with the Attorney General's office and the officials from the Department of Corrections. And the three parties to this case agreed and stipulated that certain inmates, those whom there were no public safety concerns regarding, could be and should be released from the prison before the COVID wave came, to give the prison time to deal with COVID behind the walls. I'm proud to say that we worked together on that case with colleagues in the prosecuting office and at the Department of Corrections.
I think that's exactly what we were hoping for. Judge Miriam, issue on the civil side. Tell us about that.
Thank you, Senator. Of course, around the country, many businesses have suffered great losses through the COVID epidemic. Hopefully, we are seeing the other side, but it's been an ongoing issue. And in courts around the country, we're confronting insurance coverage cases for those businesses. In the last 8 months, I've actually had now, I think I have 6 total. I've issued rulings in 4 cases where I'm asked to evaluate an insurance policy and determine whether there is coverage for the COVID losses. And those have been interesting exercises because they require a close reading of the text of each of those policies. And they vary slightly, but they do have some common language. And then early on, we had no binding circuit precedent to turn to. So I was relying on the plain language of those agreements with the assistance of district courts in my own court and around the country who'd reviewed those issues with similar language. And so over the last 8 months, we've worked our way through those issues. And now there is a greater body of law in the circuit courts, but it was certainly an interesting exercise in the careful reading of those specific policies.
Judge Miriam, as we reflect on your background and some of the comments that were made by your 2 senators, it's pretty clear that you've been involved in politics at some stage in your life. But I was struck by the experience you had with Judge Meskel in terms of lessons learned. As if I read his comments correctly, he said if you were a little older and he were a little younger, you two probably wouldn't have spoken to one another because of your different politics. And yet you managed to establish a working relationship and, in your own mind, apparently be able to draw that line where politics needed to stop in the courtroom.
Yes, that is what he said to me when I walked into his office for my interview. He said, I have your resume, and if you were a little bit older or I was a little bit younger, we might not be friends, but have a seat and let's talk. And I worked for Judge Meskel for one of the greatest years of my career. He had been a Republican member of Congress, a Republican governor of Connecticut, and I had worked on Democratic campaigns. But when we got to that job, when he was a judge and I was a law clerk, we were judicial employees. I don't think we ever once disagreed on the outcome of a case. We became great friends. I remained friends with his wife and his family after his passing. And he really did teach me a lesson about the fact that whatever your partisan background, whatever work you've done, wherever you came from, when you get to the court, The law is what matters.
Thanks. Senator Grassley.
Congratulations to both of you. I'm going to start out with Ms. Montecalvo. Your office filed an emergency petition asking the Rhode Island Supreme Court to end cash bail. The court denied. It noted that there was no reason to think that judges hadn't been taking pandemic into account as they set bail. Can you tell me more about your reasoning for requesting that of the courts to end cash bail across the board?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we prepared a second petition to the Rhode Island Supreme Court asking that the court consider releasing more people who were held on bail than it had originally intended. The rationale for our request was that the winter wave of COVID was coming, and that the prison and the public health experts at the prison had thought more space within the prison would help the prison address the incoming pandemic. We made that request to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. We conferenced it with representatives from the Attorney General's office, and ultimately that request was denied.
Okay. To you again, could you, since you haven't served as a judge, I'd like to get an idea of your judicial philosophy, and a pretty simple question. Could you tell me any Supreme Court justice you think has a judicial philosophy most closely resembling your own?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I believe that judges are here to apply the law, not to make it. And while I have not studied the judicial philosophies of all of our Supreme Court judges, one judge that I look up to immensely is Judge Thompson, the woman whose seat I would fill if I were so lucky to be confirmed today. And the reason I look up to her as a model is because of her judicial temperament, because she is the epitome of a judge who respects everyone who comes before her, who is polite, who is considerate. And the other thing I look to in Judge Thompson is that her writing is readable. It is accessible to all. And in writing so clearly, she makes our court system open to all of us, not just open to those of us who have a legal background. Thank you.
Judge Miriam, I'm going to ask you about political activism, and there's nothing wrong with political activism. But when you were working in that capacity, you protested outside the office of a politician. That's a pretty normal place to protest. More recently, we've seen others protesting outside of judges' homes. Do you think it's appropriate to protest outside a judge's home in an attempt to influence a decision?
Thank you, Senator. There is a federal statute that provides that if a person engages in certain activities directed to the attempt to influence a judicial decision or threatening a judge, that is a crime. And so anyone who commits that crime, that's a violation of the law.
Okay. I want to ask you, because you've been a magistrate and district judge for several years, similar to what I asked the previous person, which justice do you think has a judicial philosophy most closely resembling yours?
Thank you, Ranking Member. Honestly, when I read Supreme Court opinions, I read them for the outcome, and I'm not focused on who has written them. Like Ms. Montecalvo, I model myself on judges I know, and I know well Judge Thompson, who I clerked for, Judge Alvin Thompson, and Judge Meskel. And the judges I have worked for and watched and seen how they interact with people, and seen, especially, and Chair Durbin referred to this with Judge Meskel, the ability and the obligation to set aside your personal views in approaching the law. That's what I strive to achieve.
Okay, got 5 seconds left. Is there an opinion you've written that best shows your judicial philosophy and approach to the law?
Oh, thank you, Senator. I think I've got 400 opinions on Westlaw at this point, but I will tell you what I hope they all show, or at least in my later years, it takes a year or two to get good at this, is a fidelity to the law, to the rules, and a clarity of decision-making that is focused only on the dispute in front of me.
One of those 400 decisions you consider your best one.
I will. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. First, let me again welcome Lara Montecalvo and thank her for correcting an omission of mine in my opening remarks, which was to mention Rosary Thompson, who Senator Reid and I recommended for the First Circuit position. She will stay on as a senior judge on the First Circuit, so Lara will have the pleasure of working with her, and in particular, the commendation of Judge Thompson for the clarity of her writing is well merited. 2 days ago, I read her decision in the matter of removal to federal court of a state law liability case, which is about as tedious and complex and arcane a subject matter as exists in the law, and yet she made that 30-page opinion extremely lively, readable, and clear. And if Ms. Montecalvo can follow in those footsteps of liveliness and clarity of writing, she will be well served. We're extremely proud of Judge Thompson for her service, and of course are delighted that she's chosen to stay on as a senior judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. 2 things I'd like to ask you, Ms. Montecalvo. One is about this enormous amount of support that you've received from prosecutors, former prosecutors, police chiefs, folks who've been in law enforcement all their lives and may now be serving on our superior and Supreme Courts. I think a lot of people who watch these kind of things assume that a prosecutor goes into the courtroom and a public defender goes into the courtroom, and from the first moment, they're mad at each other and in each other's faces, and that this is a bit of a brawl between law enforcement and public defenders. In Rhode Island, people cycle back and forth. They see each other at the market. It's a rather different environment, and I think it's conducive to a way of doing business that will serve Ms. Montecalvo very well as a judge on the First Circuit. And I'd just like you to take a moment and reflect on the legal environment in which you operate and why there is not that kind of, ad hominem and bitter strife.
Thank you, Senator. And I hope I don't choke up here because I am so incredibly moved by the letters from so many people that I've worked with over the last 20 years. In Rhode Island, people like me are in court every single day. And we fight one battle today, and we come back, and there are more cases tomorrow. And I think that's the key, because when you do that, you learn so much about the people who you're litigating against and working with. And rather than develop a bias towards prosecutors or defense attorneys or the law enforcement, I've developed a deep appreciation for the role of law enforcement in keeping our community safe, for the challenges that they face. And the same can be said for my colleagues in the prosecutor's office. And I think they've developed those same feelings for the work of the public defender's office as well. And so while our roles on both sides of the aisle are incredibly important, our justice system depends on us to be zealous and dedicated advocates to our cause. And everyone I know in the Rhode Island legal system does that.
prosecutors and public defenders alike share zealous advocacy for their side, and that's what serves the judicial system, correct?
That's exactly it.
And in the context of somebody who shows up in court day after day after day after day after day, in case after case after case, is it different than somebody who just jets in for a particular case and then is gone in terms of the importance of your personal integrity and credibility through the series of cases that you bring?
Well, I think it is. You learn a lot about people as time passes, and many of the people who wrote the letters, who supported me, saw me as a brand new attorney in district court. Many of the officers on that letter were police officers when I was a young misdemeanor district court attorney, and they would come in with the police reports, and I would come in representing my clients. And we would talk, and we would exchange ideas, and I grew to just respect and appreciate all of the people who fill these different roles.
Well, clearly it's mutual, and I'm delighted that you're here.
Thanks, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to my questions, I would like to say that as we reel from the murders of little children and teachers in Texas, the fact that the Senate has failed to take positive action on gun legislation in even the most minimum way causes me to agree with what Michael Moore said last night, and that is, and I'm paraphrasing, that we love guns more than we love our children. We're going to have a chance to vote on two bills that our majority leader is seeking to bring to the floor, two bills passed by the House, and I hope that we will take action because only in this country is firearms the leading cause of death for children and teens, outpacing deaths from car accidents, cancer, and COVID-19 in 2020. I have no words except to call upon my colleagues to, it shouldn't even take courage to pass on these two bills that our majority leader is going to bring to the floor. So congratulations to both of you for your nominations, and I ask the following two initial questions of every nominee who appears before every committee on which I sit. I will ask you these questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, I have not.
Judge Merriam, when I saw the Leilani as part of your name, that was a big giveaway that you have some kind of connections to Hawaii. And I understand you were born in Hawaii. How long did you live there?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, it's a privilege to speak to you. Having been born in your state, I was born in 1971. We stayed about 6 months before we moved to North Carolina.
Well, I hope that even after 6 months that you carry with you the aloha spirit and how you deal with people, which is with fairness, objectivity, and need I say love. So you've had quite a varied career, and I note that obviously Judge Meskill was really an important influence on you, and you noted that you learned from him to separate your political views from your legal opinions, and at your investiture you talked about your time working for a union and said that job is where I learned to fight for people who have no voice and to connect with people who might not be open to the message I was bringing. So how did you do that? How did you connect with people who might not want to listen to what you were saying?
Thank you, Senator. I tried to speak to people on their own terms to help them understand why I was there. And I've tried to do that in every job, whether I have been acting as a judge or as a defense lawyer or a civil lawyer or with the union members. At the end of the day, my job in the union was to try to save the jobs of my members. And interestingly, Larger issues of politics sometimes came into the discussion, but at the end of the day, my job was to keep them working and feeding their families. And I just tried to help them understand that that's what I was there to do.
Thank you. Ms. Montecalvo, I was quite taken with the interview you did with the Rhode Island Women's Bar Association in connection with your receipt of the organization's Newsmaker of the Year. And when you were asked about changes you would like to see in the criminal justice system, as part of your answer, you said you'd want to, quote, see a serious reckoning with the indisputable fact that racial inequities permeate the system. Can you discuss some of the racial inequities you've seen during your time as a public defender?
Thank you, Senator. I think our legal system is the best anywhere in the world. And the words above the Supreme Court, equal justice for all, are an ideal that we all strive for. In that interview, I mentioned our Rhode Island Supreme Court, which sent a letter to the Rhode Island lawyers in the state in June of 2020, asking us to think about the way racism may have infected our Rhode Island legal system. One of the ways the court pointed Rhode Island lawyers, one of the ways it directed us to address racism within our own legal practice was for private attorneys to level the playing field by spending time at pro bono work, and for public defenders like myself to dedicate themselves to representing those of us who are disconnected from our legal service, our legal system, who have limited resources. And that was one way that we could begin to address the problems the court saw in our Rhode Island court system.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to note that I hope that you will bring that kind of understanding that there are implicit biases that we all have that could impact the objectivity, and that you seek to overcome those biases. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being with us today. And it's such a somber day. We all are thinking about the precious families in Uvalde, Texas. Ms. Montecalvo, I want to come to you on the issue of voter ID. Tennessee and Rhode Island are like a majority of states and require voters to present a valid photo ID in order to vote. So, 2011, you were a board member for Common Cause, and they stood in opposition to voter ID. So I'd like to know if you share your organization's opposition to voter ID.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. If I were confirmed to this position, I would follow Supreme Court precedent on the issue of voter ID. And our Supreme Court has said that voter identification is constitutional and is legal in some circumstances. And you're right, Rhode Island has...
Okay, talk to me then what circumstances do you think it is okay, and what circumstances do you think it is not? Do you think having to show voter ID is racist?
Thank you, Senator. If confirmed to this position, I will follow Supreme Court precedent.
Okay, in other words, you don't want to answer me. Let me ask you about cash bail, because you are in favor of ending cash bail. Is that correct?
Senator, I follow the rules of the legal system where I practice. In Rhode Island, there is no cash bail.
Okay, well, let me use this as an example. Police in New York arrested a man for a random and unprovoked murder aboard a subway train last weekend. And the offender was previously arrested for assault, robbery, menacing, and grand larceny, in addition to 3 other cases that are still pending. He was also previously convicted of attempted murder. He was arrested on April 22nd for stealing a motorcycle, but the judge set a nominal bail of $1, rejecting the prosecutor's request for a $15,000 bail. So if the judge had set bail consistent with this offender's demonstrated record of violence, he might have prevented the senseless murder last weekend. So how can you justify your opposition to cash bail in light of the clear preventative effect cash bail has on keeping violent offenders off our streets?
Thank you, Senator. And I'm not familiar with that case that you just gave as an example. What I will say is I suspect that bail determinations are...
No, I'm asking you, are you for eliminating cash bail, yes or no?
Senator, I don't have a position on cash bail. It's not something...
You don't have a position on cash bail, and you don't have a position on voter ID, correct?
My position on voter ID and on all bail determinations, if I were confirmed, is that I will follow the law.
All right. Ms. Merriam, what is your approach to constitutional interpretation of the law?
Thank you, Senator. Every inquiry begins with the text. And so if I'm presented with a question that involves a constitutional provision, usually an amendment, I first read carefully the text of that provision and then turn to Supreme Court precedent and Second Circuit precedent. To date, frankly, I think that's been sufficient in my 7+ years on the bench to solve the problem. And I don't think I've ever had to go any further than that, although with very specific issues, you sometimes find that around the country, other trial courts have spoken helpfully on fact patterns very close to yours. But generally, by starting with the text and going through the binding precedent, I'm able to reach a conclusion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Merriam, I'd like to start with you, if that's all right. In 2017, you presided over a case involving the Fair Labor Standards Act. I believe this was while you were a magistrate judge before you became a district judge. In a ruling issued in the context of a motion in limine, you barred the defendants from introducing evidence offered by the plaintiff's immigration status at trial. And your statement accompanying that ruling was, quote, that, quote, precluding evidence of plaintiff's immigration status furthers the purpose and intent of the Fair Labor Standards Act. If you remember that case, what did you use to determine the purpose and the intent of that statute?
Thank you, Senator. I don't recall that case, and I'll just accept that I said that in a motion in limine ruling.
Right.
So there's a great deal of case law on the purpose of the FLSA, and that's in large part because courts are required in most circumstances to approve settlements under the FLSA. And so there is a fair amount of law on the question of the purpose. And the Second Circuit law on that talks about the purpose as being ensuring that that hourly workers in particular are paid their proper wages under state law.
Right. So what sources do you generally use when you're undertaking that kind of inquiry to figure out what the purpose of an intent of that statute or any other statute is?
Thank you, Senator.
Can that ever override the language?
Oh, absolutely not. No, the language of the statute controls.
Let's talk about the Ninth Amendment for a minute. When you came through this committee about a year ago, in the written questions that I submitted to you after your hearing, I asked, does the Constitution protect rights that are not
expressly enumerated in the Constitution. And your response read as follows, quote, "The Ninth Amendment protects against the infringement of unenumerated rights, suggesting that those rights must be protected." What specific rights has the Supreme Court identified as flowing from the Ninth Amendment?
Thank you, Senator. I think most of the areas of law where the Supreme Court has recognized unenumerated rights depend on sort of a constellation of amendments, and those are largely, they're summarized, I think, best in Glucksberg, and they involve things like the right to parent your children and dictate their education, marital privacy rights, things of that nature.
Troxel, for example. Any rights that have been found independently as flowing from the Ninth Amendment and no other source?
You know, as I sit here today, Senator Lee, I can't recall one, but I can't speak to that right now.
Okay. On February 1st, President Biden said that he was looking for, in that case, a Supreme Court nominee with, quote, "a judicial philosophy that is more one that suggests that there are unenumerated rights to the Constitution and all the amendments mean something, including the Ninth Amendment," close quote. Do you share that judicial philosophy that President Biden described?
Thank you, Senator Lee. I'm not familiar with the comment from the president, but I can tell you this. My only judicial philosophy is that the text of a document, the Constitution, a statute, or a rule, and binding precedent are what guide me. Rule of law and predictability are what matters.
Okay. Ms. Montecalvo, what are the elements of Article 3 standing? Article 3 justiciability, including standing.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Article 3 standing plaintiffs must show an injury, causation, and then there must be redressability. The federal district court must have a way to remedy the situation.
And what are some of the other infirmities that can interfere with, assuming standing has been met? What else can take something out under the justiciability doctrine?
Thank you, Senator. I was thinking as I gave my answer, and then courts must always consider mootness, and an issue must be ripe as well.
What role should the text and contemporaneous understanding of a statute or provision of the Constitution play in the interpretation of those provisions?
Thank you. I would echo Judge Merriam's words, which is that the plain language of the text controls, and that is absolutely the only place to begin the analysis. And if I were confirmed to this position, that's where I would
Right.
start.
No, I get that. I respect that. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But what role should the text and the original understanding of it, the understanding at the time of enactment if a statute, or at the time of ratification if a provision of the Constitution, what is that original understanding? What role does that play?
Thank you. The Supreme Court has said, both in Heller and in Crawford versus Washington, that the plain public meaning of the text of the Constitution will control the court's analysis, and that is the precedent that I would follow in those cases.
As understood at the time of enactment or ratification?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Thank you. I see my time's expired, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Lee. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to you both. Thank you for your service. Judge Merriam, I'm interested in the letters from 26 former federal prosecutors, including at least 2 former United States attorneys, Chris Droney and Stan Torty. Is that correct?
I believe so, Senator.
Having been a U.S. attorney myself, I know that trials between the federal prosecutor and the public defender can sometimes be contentious. So I think that this letter is extremely noteworthy. Were your trials sometimes contentious with federal prosecutors?
Thank you, Senator. There are always times when there are two sparring advocates that things do get contentious. But Connecticut is a small state. We are repeat players, and we all really respect each person's role in the system. Just as you don't get angry as an advocate when the court rules against you, the court's doing its job, you don't get angry when your opponent makes an argument. And also, in federal court, something like 95% of criminal cases are resolved by way of a guilty plea. And so the collaboration and the attempt to reach a just result from both sides is so important that you can't let the contentiousness of a battle interfere with that respect and collegiality.
And because you come back, as you say, you're repeat players, you see each other in case after case, personal integrity really counts for a lot.
Absolutely, Senator. I tell young lawyers that when I swear them into the bar of our court, that you need to understand that this is a place where we will rely on you, and you need to establish yourself as someone who can be trusted.
Let me ask you, how would you reflect on your experience as a district court judge, acknowledging that it has been comparatively brief?
Thank you, Senator. I have been pleased to find how much I've enjoyed being able to dig deeper into the substantive legal issues as a district judge. I did a fair amount of that as a magistrate judge, but I get to do more now. And the case management aspects, I am a process person, and the effort to move cases efficiently and establish efficient processes has, as dull as that may sound to some people, been exciting to me in that time.
You did a lot of the same kind of work as a magistrate judge, but now you do it more deeply, but also my guess is focused on more important legal issues.
So as a district judge and a magistrate judge are sort of partners in managing a civil case, but the magistrate judge is likely to handle interim issues, whereas as the district judge, I now have the opportunity to resolve the summary judgment motions or the motions to dismiss and to get to the heart of the substance of the case myself instead of just teeing it up for someone else.
Thank you. I was going to ask a bunch of questions about your pies, but I think in the interest of giving my colleagues an opportunity to go forward, I will spare you and our other nominee those questions as well. In any event, we really thank you both for your service. And speaking for myself, I look forward to your speedy confirmation. We need you on the Second Circuit for sure. And I think you'll have broad support, as will you, Ms. Montecalvo. Please be mindful that senators may submit written questions following the hearing. I'm speaking on behalf of the chair who is voting, I think, right now, and we'd ask you to work diligently to respond to those questions. Thank you both. And with that, we will move to our second panel. I'd ask for everyone's patience as we finalize the setup for these three nominees.